video on basting steaks. It doesn't. What? This is because I talked about that I basted for the first time. Chat, the flavors were amazing. It tasted... Normally, I just salt and pepper on both sides or whatever, and that's it. But this is like the flavors were on all sides. There's no way it doesn't make a difference. I swear I'd pass a blind test. But it was also the stuff I put in, to be fair, like thyme and rosemary. It's hard to put that on the steak. But if you put it in the butter and then you baste the steak in that. Okay, if this is simply a comparison between frying it in a bunch of butter, thyme, garlic, blah, 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 or frying it and also pouring the butter on top of it, yeah, okay, maybe there's no difference in those two.
We're going to finish the cooking process with butter. So a good amount of butter in there. We're going to continue to cook it by basting it.
Like most chefs, I finish pan roasting my meats with an obscene amount of butter and herbs, spooning wave after wave of foaming hot butter over the steak for the last minute or so of cooking. The pan should be hot enough to brown the butter, but not so hot that it burns the butter.
That looks good.
A friend recently asked me if basting works, or is it just something chefs do to play with their food? And if it does work, what's the best technique? There's a lot of conflicting information online about whether you should or shouldn't baste. Does it speed cooking or not? Does it keep meat moist and juicy or not? And what about adding more flavor? So today, we're going to put basting to the test and separate fact from fiction. I'm going to try to answer 4 questions. Does basting speed or slow cooking? Does it cook meat more evenly? Does it keep it juicier? And does it add flavor? The opening...
I didn't really, it was only the 4th one, this one, that I thought it tasted better.
The opening of this video shows you how it's usually done. In this case, on the hotline in London's Fallow restaurant. By the way, not only are they a great restaurant, but they have a really good YouTube channel that you should definitely check out. I'll put a link to their original video in the description below. But is basting just a waste of good butter? If you'd asked me a week ago, I would have told you that I believed basting speeds cooking and adds flavor, but that I don't believe that it cooks meat more evenly or keeps it juicier. But after a bunch of testing, I might have to change my religion when it comes to basting.
Wow.
I've been doing my tests by cutting steaks from the same muscle to the same 1.5 inch thickness, and weighing them so I can figure out later whether basting kept them juicier. I use my wireless combustion predictive thermometer with its 8 sensors to measure the true core and surface temperatures so that I can time both the cooking speed and whether basting does or doesn't cool the surface of the steaks. I've also been using a temperature-controlled induction burner so that I can keep the pan's temperature the same from test to test.
Are you a fan of iShowSpeed? Why are you asking me this? No?
To make it as fair as possible. I'm cooking at 325 degrees Fahrenheit, which might sound low, but it's actually more than enough for a great crust and avoids too much overcooking and unevenness beneath the steak surface.
Why
Plus,
not? Because I'm
it's
not
a lot less
a
smoky in
teenager.
my kitchen. Don't believe the kitchen bullshit that you need a ripping hot pan to cook a great steak.
Okay.
I'm aiming for a final doneness at the core of 128 degrees Fahrenheit.
So I think, well, this is filet mignon, isn't it?
Which is what I consider medium rare. For consistency, I flip both steaks each time the core increases by 10 degrees Fahrenheit. For the steak I'm basting, I'm adding butter to the pan once the steak has 2 flips to go. This does speed cooking, but not by very much, only about a minute or so across a bunch of...
Like, before when I was cooking, I would only put the seasoning on the top and the bottom, but never on the sides, because that's, like, so difficult to do. But when you baste it, you can pour butter and it will drip down the sides and leave flavor on the side, no? Like, that's just how it is. That's what I meant. What every bite had good flavor balance in it. What do you mean, no?
Tests I've done. This actually surprised me. Because each time I spoon hot oil onto the surface, I'm adding energy to the top of the steak, effectively cooking it from 2 sides at once. And I'm also preventing heat loss by putting a lid on evaporative cooling. But since you baste near the end of cooking, it just turns out it's not much of a time saver. But it does lead to an important difference later, after resting.
Okay.
In my testing, both steaks take about the same amount of total cooking and resting time to reach their...
This one is hotter.
...peak doneness. About 20 minutes for these 1.5 inch thick fillet steaks. But the core temperature of the steak that was basted increased by a surprising 34 degrees Fahrenheit after resting,
I don't understand what I'm looking at here. Why is the time going up and the temperature is going up? If they're resting, what am I looking at here?
The other steak that wasn't basted only increased by 22 degrees. This is the difference between very rare.
It gets warmer? Oh, right. He's measuring the temperature of the center, so it's still accessing the center. Okay, yep, that makes sense.
And medium rare.
It took me a second. What? That's sort of confusing because I was like thinking this is like the overall temperature of the steak. Like, how can it get hotter when you take it off the pan? Ah, it's the center of the steak. Okay, sorry, chat, bit donk today.
34 degrees Fahrenheit after resting, while the other steak that wasn't basted only increased by 22 degrees. This is the difference between very rare and medium rare.
Rare.
But otherwise, the evenness of cooking
Damn, is this how long do you guys leave a steak when you've cooked it? I would never leave it 20, I don't think. 10 tops.
Edge to edge looks about the same. Although basting does make it easier to get some color on the sides and other hard to reach places on the meat. So basting doesn't speed cooking. It just causes more carryover cooking from the extra heat being added at the end, which you could easily adjust for by cooking the steak a bit longer without any basting. And having weighed these steaks both before and after cooking, basting doesn't make a difference. Either way, you lose about 10% of the moisture in the meat. So the idea that basting keeps meat juicier is also not true. But I did notice that basting keeps the surface of the meat more than 10 degrees hotter after resting.
Okay.
Which is noticeable when you eat it.
Yeah.
The entire slice of the basted steak is still pleasantly warm, even with 10 minutes of resting.
So that's already a benefit then. So it is nice to do.
And by weighing both steaks as they rested, I was able to work out that the basted steak was losing heat from escaping steam more slowly.
That's also good.
Which, together with the extra blast of heat from the basting, helps explain its warmer surface at the end of resting. And what about flavor? In a blind triangle test, where I tried 2 slices from the same steak and a third slice from the other steak, and then tried to figure out which was which, I could easily tell basted from unbasted.
Oh?
But only when I included some herbs with the
Right,
basting.
yeah, okay.
I think A and C are the same. B is different. A and C are basted.
But that's another thing, right? Because it's hard to... How do you apply garlic to a steak? It's easier to baste it in garlicky butter than to like try to season it with garlic, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, the basted ones are definitely tastier. Even if it's a superficial effect, they're definitely more delicious. But what if I just brushed brown butter flavored with herbs onto an unbasted steak? Can I actually tell the difference between the steak that's been basted as it cooks?
But now he's essentially fucking basting it. So what? Now you're testing a basted steak versus a basted steak?
The one that's been anointed with flavored fat as it rests? B and A are the same. C is different. I think B and A are basted.
No, C and A were the ones brushed in butter, and then B was basted.
I didn't want that to be true. So is basting worthwhile when you're pan roasting? Well, the answers to my original 4 questions are no, 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 and no. Basting certainly isn't a bad thing to do, although you could argue you're wasting a lot of butter. But I'm probably going to keep playing with my food, because it is really satisfying to spoon a bunch of foaming hot butter over searing meat and getting a bit more color on the hard-to-reach spots of the meat, as well as keeping the surface of the meat warm as it rests.
I feel like the only argument against it is, yeah, if your butter is pricey, if you don't want to waste all this butter, fine, don't do it. But, counter argument to that argument, here's how you really do it if you're a good chef. You baste your steak, take it out, put that steak to rest, take all of that delicious herb and steak-infused butter, and make a sauce out of it. Boom! You haven't wasted any butter. You just made a delicious sauce. You basted yourself. You're winning in every essence of the word. All right? There's a best of internet daily notes. There's the new unusual memes. This thing looks insane.